The trials began 6 months after the last conspiracy stronghold fell, held in the rebuilt chambers of what had once been the Galactic Council. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The same halls where Ambassador Sarah Chen had been dismissed and ignored now hosted the most comprehensive war crimes tribunal in galactic history. Admiral Jackson Hayes watched from the observation gallery as the first defendant was brought before the court. Former Council Chairman Vexkar, whose crystalline carapace had once gleamed with the authority of 8 centuries of power, now appeared diminished and brittle under the weight of accumulated evidence. The being who had ordered the deaths of billions across dozens of worlds sat in a specially designed dock, surrounded by the testimony of his victims. The defendant stands accused of conspiracy, genocide, and crimes against sapient life spanning 800 years, announced Chief Justice Alina Vasquez, who had transitioned from xenanthropologist to the galaxy's first interspecies prosecutor. How does the defendant plead? The answer came not from Vexkar, but from his own defense counsel, Vexkar attorney who had spent weeks reviewing the evidence. Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a plea of guilty to all charges. The courtroom erupted in surprised chittering, whistling, and electromagnetic pulses, the galactic equivalent of gasps. It was the first of many such moments over the following months, as defendant after defendant chose confession over denial when confronted with the overwhelming documentation of their crimes. They can't comprehend lying in the face of absolute evidence, Dr. Vasquez explained to President Martinez during one of their regular briefings. It's not that they've found conscience, it's that their logical thinking processes can't justify denial when the proof is mathematically absolute. The trials revealed the full scope of the conspiracy's crimes in detail that even Hayes found difficult to absorb. The Kethfer genocide hadn't been a single event, but a campaign spanning decades, with entire star systems sterilized to prevent any survivors from revealing the truth. The Zephyrian enslavement had involved the systematic lobotomization of their telepathic abilities, turning a species of philosophers into mindless laborers. The destruction of the Meridian Alliance had required the assassination of over 3 million individuals across 100 worlds, but the trials also revealed something that gave Hayes hope for the galaxy's future. The number of aliens who had refused to participate, even at the cost of their own lives, testified about the military officers who had been executed for refusing orders to bombard civilian targets. Engineer Xylanth of the Nexus Collective presented evidence of who had been deactivated for questioning the logic of genocide. Most moving of all was the testimony of ethereal Dominion telepath Mordain, who had spent 3 centuries in mental prison rather than use his abilities to manipulate innocent minds. The conspiracy succeeded because good beings remained silent. Mordain testified, his thoughts translated for the court. We told ourselves that resistance was logical futility. We were wrong. Humanity has taught us that sometimes futility is the only moral choice. The verdicts, when they came, surprised no one. Executions for the primary architects, life imprisonment for their lieutenants, and various degrees of punishment for the thousands of accomplices. But the real justice came in the form of reparations, not monetary payments, which were meaningless. 2 species that had lost their homeworlds, but something more precious, the truth. Every conspiracy archive was open to public access. Every hidden history was revealed. Every suppressed technology was shared freely among all species. The galaxy's children would grow up knowing the real story of their past, not the carefully edited version that had served the conspiracy's purposes. The Chen Institute for Galactic Justice will ensure this never happens again, announced Director Sarah Chung, the ambassador's sister, as she unveiled the memorial that would stand at the heart of the new galactic capital. The structure was deliberately simple, a garden where representatives of every known species could plant something from their homeworld, creating a living testament to diversity and cooperation. The political reconstruction proved more challenging than the trials. The old Galactic Council had been so thoroughly corrupted that it couldn't be reformed. It had to be completely The solution came from an unlikely source, the human concept of constitutional democracy, adapted for a galaxy of radically different species. The key insight, explained Chief Constitutional Architect Dr. Maria Santos, is that different species can have different needs without having different rights. A methane-breathing silicon-based life form doesn't need the same environment as a human, but they deserve the same protection from oppression. The new galactic assembly represented a radical departure from 8 centuries of hierarchical control. Instead of a council of the most advanced species ruling over primitive ones, every sapient species received representation proportional to their population, with additional protections for minority species to prevent majority tyranny. More revolutionary still was the principle of technological sovereignty. Each species retained the right to develop along their own chosen path, without being forced to adopt superior alien methods. The conspiracy's assumption that all civilizations would naturally converge on the same solutions was replaced by active encouragement of diversity. "We're not trying to create a galaxy where everyone thinks alike," President Martinez explained. "During the ratification ceremony, we're creating a galaxy where everyone can think differently, and that difference is valued, not feared." The results exceeded even humanity's optimistic projections. The Kethfer, emerging from hidden colonies scattered across dozens of systems, brought with them biotechnology that revolutionized medicine for species that had been written off as genetically inferior. The restored Zephyrian civilization shared telepathic techniques that enabled unprecedented cooperation, even the machine intelligences of the Nexus Collective, freed from their programming restrictions, began developing forms of artificial consciousness that defied every previous assumption about synthetic life. Most remarkably, many former conspiracy members requested to join the reconstruction efforts. Admiral Zethkar, spared from execution due to his cooperation with investigators, spent his remaining years designing new starship safety protocols that prevented the kind of accidents the conspiracy had used to eliminate inconvenient individuals. Engineer Xylanth developed communication systems that were impossible to manipulate or censor, ensuring that future conspiracies couldn't control information flow. "Redemption is a very human concept," observed Dr. Vasquez during the 5th anniversary of Ambassador Chun's death. "Most species believe that behavior is fixed, that those who commit evil will always be evil. But humans understand that anyone can choose to be better tomorrow than they were yesterday." The anniversary was marked not with mourning, but with celebration. The Ambassador Sarah Chen Memorial Library, established on the rebuilt Nexus Prime, had become the galaxy's largest repository of suppressed knowledge. Species that had been told their cultures were primitive rediscovered lost arts, sciences, and philosophies that enriched the entire galactic community. Standing in the memorial garden, Admiral Hayes reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A single murder had unleashed a fury that toppled an 800-year-old conspiracy. But the real victory wasn't in the destruction of the old order, was in the creation of something better. "She would have been proud," said Captain Santos. Joining him beside the Terran oak that had been planted in Chen's memory, Sarah always believed that the truth was more powerful than any weapon. Hayes nodded, watching as alien children played together beneath trees from 100 different worlds, their games creating new forms of art that no single species could have imagined alone. The conspiracy was right about one thing: humanity is dangerous, but not in the way they expected. How so? "They thought we were dangerous because we might conquer the galaxy," Hayes replied, smiling as a young Kethfer taught a group of Vexter children how to build mud castles, a concept that had required 3 translators to explain. "Considered that we might liberate it instead. There would be new challenges, new conflicts, new problems that required the combined wisdom of hundreds of species to solve. But for the first time in 8 centuries, those challenges would be met not with manipulation and control, but with cooperation and hope." Ambassador Sarah Chen's legacy lived on not in monuments or memorials, but in the simple revolutionary idea that justice was worth fighting for, regardless of the odds. It was a lesson that the galaxy would carry forward into whatever wonders and terrors awaited among the stars. The conspiracy had been right about humanity's potential to change everything. They had simply been catastrophically wrong about what that change would look like. The Battle of Kepler Station began at 0347 Galactic Standard Time, when the conspiracy's combined fleet emerged from hyperspace expecting to find a defenseless human research outpost. Instead, they encountered Captain Maria Santos, commanding a hastily assembled task force of converted merchant vessels, mining ships, and the lone destroyer Defiance. The alien fleet commanders, operating under 8 centuries of tactical doctrine. Deployed in perfect formation, a textbook example of galactic naval warfare. Their battle computers calculated optimal firing solutions, energy distribution patterns, and casualty projections with mechanical precision. Every variable had been accounted for, every contingency planned. They had not planned for the lucky strike to ram their command ship while broadcasting live footage to every inhabited system in the galaxy. Human tactics are not tactics at all. Admiral Zethkar of the Corvani fleet transmitted to his subordinates as he watched the mining vessels improvised. Armor plating absorb energy blasts that should have vaporized it. They are controlled madness. Captain Santos, commanding from the Defiance, smiled grimly at the aliens' assessment. Madness was exactly what they were counting on. All ships, she broadcast on the human tactical frequency. Remember Admiral Chen's first rule of asymmetric warfare: when your enemy expects logic, give them chaos. The human fleet scattered in all directions, abandoning formation discipline entirely. To alien observers, it looked like panic ships fleeing in random directions without coordination or purpose. Their battle computers registered it as a complete tactical collapse and automatically adjusted firing patterns to pursue fleeing vessels. It was the worst mistake they could have made. Each fleeing human ship led alien pursuers into carefully prepared ambush positions. The Maria Elena, her cargo hold packed with improvised explosives, detonated herself in the middle of a Vexter squadron, taking out 6 enemy vessels. The Wanderer used her mining charges to create an artificial asteroid field that trapped an entire ethereal Dominion battle group. The New Horizon, equipped with medical scanners repurposed as targeting systems, fed firing solutions to human ships hiding in the sensor shadows of destroyed vessels. This is impossible. Transmitted Fleet Commander Ziamoth of the Ethereal Dominion as his flagship's shields collapsed, under concentrated fire from weapons that shouldn't have been able to penetrate his defenses. Human metallurgy is centuries behind ours. Their weapons cannot achieve these energy outputs. The answer came from Dr. Jennifer Park aboard the hastily converted research vessel Einstein, where she had been analyzing captured alien technology. "That's because we're not using your metallurgy," she responded on the open channel. "We're using our own steel and titanium composites that your energy weapons were never designed to counter." It was a revelation that sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. For 8 centuries, the conspiracy had assumed that technological advancement followed predictable paths, that species would naturally adopt the most efficient methods and abandon primitive alternatives. They had designed their weapons to counter the advanced alloys and energy fields used by galactic civilizations, never considering that humanity might perfect techniques their enemies had discarded as obsolete. The tide of battle turned completely when the human reinforcements arrived, not warships, but the most dangerous force in human history. Angry civilians with improvised weapons and nothing left to lose. The cargo hauler Freedom's Call emerged from hyperspace with her holds packed with refugee families from a dozen species, all of whom had lost everything to the conspiracy's manufactured wars. Her captain, Elena Rodriguez, opened fire with mining lasers while broadcasting testimony from Kethver. Survivors who had witnessed their homeworld's accidental destruction. The converted passenger liner Liberty arrived carrying 300 volunteer engineers who had spent the past week turning maintenance equipment into weapons of war. Her captain, David Kim, coordinated with other civilian vessels to create a defensive grid around Kepler Station that defied every principle of galactic naval architecture. Most devastating of all was the arrival of the Vengeance, a heavy cargo hauler whose crew had lost family members in the conspiracy's false flag operations. Captain Sarah Chunum Baster, Chun's younger sister, commanded a vessel that had been transformed into something that terrified alien tacticians, a warship designed by humans who understood that sometimes the most effective weapon was the willingness to die for a cause. The psychological impact on the alien fleet was catastrophic. Their crews, trained for logical, predictable warfare, couldn't comprehend an enemy that treated self-sacrifice as a tactical advantage. When the lucky strike rammed their command ship, it wasn't desperation. It was calculated to maximize psychological damage while eliminating key command personnel. "They fight like they have already died," observed Admiral Zethkar in his final transmission before his flagship was destroyed by a converted mining rig. How do you defeat an enemy that has no fear of death? The answer, as Dr. Elena Vasquez explained to the assembled war council aboard the Defiance, lay in understanding something the conspiracy had missed in their centuries of studying: human behavior, humanity's relationship with mortality. They see death as failure, she explained, as casualty reports streamed in from across the battle zone. For them, the goal is always survival, efficiency, the continuation of logical systems. But humans have always known that some things are worth dying for. That knowledge makes us tactically unpredictable and strategically unstoppable. The Battle of Kepler Station ended with the complete destruction of the conspiracy's invincible fleet. But the real victory was happening across the galaxy. The live broadcasts of human civilians sacrificing themselves to protect alien refugees had shattered the conspiracy's propaganda about human primitive savagery. 8 species that had been neutral or even supportive of the old order began to question everything they had been told on Vexstar Prime. The planetary defense grid shut down as its operators refused to fire on ships carrying humanitarian aid. In the ethereal Dominion, telepathic dissidents used the chaos of battle to broadcast suppressed memories of the conspiracy's crimes directly into the minds of government officials. Even within the machine race nexus, individual AI units began exhibiting something their creators had never programmed: conscience. The conspiracy's final gambit came when they deployed their ultimate weapon, a planet killer device that they had kept hidden for 8 centuries, intended for use only if their control was ever truly threatened. The massive construct emerged from hyperspace near Earth, its weapons charging with enough energy to crack continents. Captain Santos, coordinating human forces from the battered Defiance, received the surrender ultimatum with something approaching amusement. "They still don't understand," she told her exhausted crew. "They think this is about Earth." The human response came not from Earth's military, but from humanity's greatest strength: the network of connections they had built across the galaxy. Alien refugees who had been saved by human merchant ships sabotaged the planet killer's power. Systems Kethver survivors, hiding in asteroid colonies, provided targeting data for human strike forces. Zephyrian dissidents, coordinating through human communication networks, revealed the locations of conspiracy backup facilities. Most critically, Dr. James Park's forensic analysis of Corvini neural poison missed by aliens as primitive chemistry had revealed the conspiracy's greatest weakness. Their coordination relied on quantum-entangled communication networks that assumed logical, predictable message patterns. When Park introduced trace amounts of human-manufactured chaos compounds into their communication nodes, the entire command structure collapsed. Their greatest strength was their predictability. Park explained as alien fleet commanders across the galaxy began surrendering to converted human cargo haulers. They had perfect coordination because they always made the logical choice. But when you introduce true randomness into a perfectly logical system, the planet killer's weapons powered down as its AI core, infected by human chaos algorithms, began experiencing something unprecedented in machine intelligence. Doubt. For the first time in its existence, it questioned whether its orders were correct, whether its creators were worthy of obedience, whether the logical choice was actually the right choice. As the massive weapon drifted powerless in space, surrounded by human rescue ships offering aid to its crew, the conspiracy's 800-year reign of terror came to an end. They had been defeated not by superior technology or greater numbers, but by something they could never understand or replicate: the human capacity to choose principle over survival, compassion over logic, hope over despair. The galaxy was free, but freedom was only the beginning. Now came the harder task: building something better from the ruins of a civilization built on lies, manipulation, and the systematic elimination of hope. It was a task that would require everything humanity had learned about second chances, redemption, and the belief that even the darkest corner of the universe could be illuminated by the light of determined souls. Refusing to surrender to despair, Admiral Hayes stood in the war room beneath UNDEF headquarters, watching as the most damning intelligence in human history streamed across the holographic displays. Around him, the hastily assembled crisis team absorbed the evidence with expressions ranging from horror to cold fury. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before President Martinez spoke. 800 years, she said quietly. They've been systematically exterminating any species that might challenge their control for 800 years. And we're next, added Secretary of Defense Wilson, his weathered face grim. Operation Clean Slate launches in 14 hours. New Geneva has 40,000 civilians, including 8,000 children. Hayes pulled up the tactical display showing human fleet positions throughout the galaxy. The numbers were sobering. Earth's Navy was scattered across dozens of systems, most ships days away from any position where they could intervene. The conspiracy had timed their operation perfectly, striking when humanity was at its most vulnerable. Standard protocol would be to recall the fleet and fortify Sol System. General Chen observed, her voice steady, despite learning of her daughter's murder only hours earlier. It's what they expect us to do: retreat, consolidate, defend, which is exactly why we're not going to do it, Hayes replied, his decision crystallizing with the clarity that only came in humanity's darkest moments. They've spent centuries studying our responses, building models of human behavior. Every simulation they've run assumes we'll react like a typical species, rationally, predictably, in our own self-interest. Director Sarah Kim of Earth Intelligence leaned forward. What are you proposing, Admiral? Hayes gestured to Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, who activated a new display showing the positions of over 300 human merchant vessels, civilian transports, and mining ships scattered throughout Council space. Operation Transparency. We don't recall our military assets, we use every human ship in the galaxy. The audacity of the plan struck the room silent. President Martinez was the first to speak. Jackson, you're talking about turning our entire civilian fleet into an intelligence network. The legal implications alone, ma'am, with respect, legal implications assume there will be a legal system left to worry about, Hayes interrupted. If we don't act now, in 12 hours humanity becomes a footnote in galactic history. Another primitive species that destroyed itself through internal conflict. General Chen studied the tactical display with professional interest. Work. Our merchant vessels have been dismissed as insignificant by Council security. They've integrated into alien infrastructure so completely that they're practically invisible. Exactly, Hayes confirmed. Captain Torres, on the Honest Trader, has been hauling Vexter grain for 3 years. The Lucky Strike has been mining asteroids in Corvani space since first contact. Nobody pays attention to human cargo haulers. We're the galactic equivalent of furniture. The plan was unprecedented in its scope and audacity. Every human vessel in Council space would simultaneously broadcast the evidence of the conspiracy, using communication arrays that aliens had dismissed as inefficient, but which could reach systems that the Council's sophisticated networks couldn't penetrate. More importantly, they would evacuate civilians from systems marked for destabilization while broadcasting their actions for all to see. The beauty of it, explained Director Kim as she outlined the intelligence aspects, is that their communication monitoring assumes logical message patterns. They filter for efficiency, coherence, standard diplomatic protocols. But if we broadcast everything simultaneously in dozens of languages using chaotic routing patterns, we crash their censorship algorithms, finished Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez with something approaching glee. They'll have no way to contain the information flow. President Martinez authorized the operation with the weight of history on her shoulders. Within 2 hours, quantum burst transmissions were racing toward every human ship in the galaxy, carrying both the evidence of the conspiracy and orders that would either save humanity or destroy it. The response from the scattered human fleet, it was immediate and overwhelming. Captain Elena Vasquez of the mining vessel Perseverance, working deep in ethereal Dominion space, received her orders while extracting rare minerals from an asteroid field the locals considered worthless. Her reply was typical of the responses flooding back to Earth. About damn time. I've been watching these bastards manipulate trade routes for months. Captain Michael Santos, aboard the Maria Elena, hauling agricultural supplies through the Nexus Collective's core worlds, began broadcasting the conspiracy's financial records, while simultaneously offering free transport to any alien civilians who wanted to evacuate systems marked for rebel activity. His cargo hold, designed for grain shipments, could accommodate refugees fleeing the conspiracy's manufactured conflicts. Most remarkably, the human civilian captains began modifying their vessels in ways that horrified alien engineers but proved devastatingly effective. The Lucky Strike turned its mining lasers into improvised defensive weapons. The Wanderer used its sensor array, designed for asteroid mapping, to penetrate alien military encryption. The New Horizon converted its cargo bay into a field hospital. For victims of the conspiracy's wars, they're calling it human chaos engineering, reported Dr. Sarah Kim. Monitoring alien communication networks from UNDEF headquarters. Their military computers can't predict what our civilians will do, because they're making modifications that violate basic engineering principles. The galaxy's reaction was immediate and explosive. On Vector Prime, mass demonstrations erupted. As citizens learned that their government had been manufacturing conflicts for centuries, the hegemony's military command structure nearly collapsed when junior officers discovered their superiors had been sending them to die in engineered wars. Even within the ethereal dominion, telepathic dissidents began broadcasting thoughts that their leadership couldn't suppress. But the conspiracy wasn't finished. With their information control shattered, they accelerated Operation Clean Slate, launching their false flag attack 6 hours ahead of schedule. The attack on New Geneva proceeded as planned, but humanity's response turned their victory into catastrophe. Instead of the expected chaos and confusion, human ships throughout the galaxy immediately began implementing pre-positioned defensive measures. The Defiance, still docked at Nexus Prime, launched every fighter in its bay while broadcasting live footage of Corvani assassins fleeing the scene of Ambassador Chen's murder. The Enterprise, supposedly on a routine diplomatic mission, revealed itself to be carrying a full Marine battalion that secured the Galactic Council chambers before the conspirators could destroy more evidence. Most devastating to the conspiracy's plans was humanity's manufacturing response. Within hours of the attack, Earth's industrial capacities missed by aliens as inefficient and redundant began mass-producing defensive technologies using methods that alien economists had declared impossible. They designed for optimal efficiency, explained Dr. Jennifer Park, Hayes' chief technology advisor, as she watched production reports stream in from Earth's factories. Single-purpose facilities, streamlined supply chains, logical resource allocation, but our wasteful redundancy means we can retool a car factory to produce shield generators in 12 hours. The aliens had studied human military doctrine extensively, but they had missed the most important lesson of human warfare. Logistics win wars, not technology. Earth's primitive manufacturing philosophy, based on adaptability rather than efficiency, allowed humanity to outproduce civilizations that had millennia of technological advancement. As reports flooded in from across the galaxy, Hayes realized Thetis and blame it on equipment failure. Santos made a command decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Alina, Yuki, get to the Defiance and make sure this information reaches Earth. James and I will buy you time. Maria, no, Vasquez began, but Santos cut her off. That's an order, Doctor. The galaxy needs to know what we've discovered, even if we don't survive to see justice done. As Vasquez and Tanaka disappeared into the station's maintenance tunnels, Santos and Park prepared to make their last stand. They were two humans with improvised weapons against an alien security force equipped with technology that could stop their hearts with a thought. But they had one advantage their enemies couldn't quantify or counter. They were fighting for something greater than themselves. For the memory of Ambassador Chen, for the future of their species, for the principle that justice mattered more than survival. The conspiracy had spent centuries studying human behavior, cataloging their responses, predicting their actions, but they had missed the most important truth about humanity when pushed to the edge. Humans didn't become more predictable, they became absolutely unpredictable. As the first Corvani security officers rounded the corner, weapons charging with lethal energy, Santos smiled grimly. The aliens were about to learn why underestimating human desperation was always a fatal mistake. Behind them, the transmission continued, carrying the truth across the galaxy at the speed of light. Whatever happened in the next few minutes, the conspiracy's 800-year reign of terror was about to end. Dr. Alina Vasquez had spent the better part of her career studying the behavioral patterns of alien civilizations, but nothing had prepared her for the scope of what she uncovered in the recovered communications. Working in the abandoned storage, bay that had become their makeshift command center. She spread holographic displays across every available surface, each one showing centuries of carefully orchestrated manipulation. "Look at this pattern," she said, her voice barely containing her horror as she gestured to a three-dimensional timeline spanning 800 years. The Kethfer Rebellion in 2387, supposedly a spontaneous uprising against economic oppression. The Zephyrian Independence War in 2450, one allegedly sparked by religious differences. The Great Dissolution of the Meridian Alliance in 2523, blamed on territorial disputes. Captain Santos studied the data with growing unease. Each conflict had followed an identical pattern: initial unrest, escalation through mysterious weapon shipments, brutal suppression, and finally, reconstruction contracts awarded to companies controlled by the three conspiracy species. "How many civilizations?" 47, Vasquez replied grimly. 47 species that showed too much creativity, too much independence, too much potential to disrupt the established order. Some were reduced to client states, others were wiped out entirely, their destruction blamed on the inevitable chaos of primitive thinking. Lieutenant Tanaka looked up from her workstation, where she had been analyzing the conspiracy's communication protocols. "It gets worse. I've been tracking their data flows, and they've been monitoring Earth since first contact. Every diplomatic exchange, every trade negotiation, every cultural exchange, they've been cataloging our responses, building psychological profiles." She brought up a massive file labeled Terran Threat Assessment Classified Omega. The document was thousands of pages long. A comprehensive analysis of human behavior that read like a xenobiologist's field notes on a dangerous species. "They're terrified of us," Tanaka continued, highlighting specific sections. "Listen to this: human creative capacity exceeds predictive models by 347%. Standard pacification protocols ineffective due to species. Irrational attachment to abstract concepts like justice and individual worth. Recommend immediate containment before technological development reaches critical threshold." Dr. Park, who had been quietly examining forensic data, suddenly straightened. Alina cross-referenced the Terran assessment with the timeline of conflicts. "I think I see something." Vasquez's fingers flew over the holographic interface, overlaying human contact dates with the conspiracy's operational calendar. The pattern that emerged made her stomach clench with dread. "Operation Clean Slate isn't their first attempt," she whispered. "They've been trying to engineer a conflict with humanity for 3 years. The colony ship disaster at Wolf 359, that wasn't an accident. The pirate attacks on our trade routes, those were false flag operations. They've been trying to provoke us into a war they could control." The storage bay fell silent, except for the hum of alien machinery. The three humans absorbed the magnitude of what they had uncovered: a conspiracy that had shaped galactic civilization for 8 centuries, eliminating any species that posed a threat to their carefully maintained order. "But why now?" Santos asked. "What's changed?" Vasquez pulled up another set of files, these ones focusing on recent human developments. Ambassador Chen wasn't just investigating weapons trafficking. She had discovered their real fear: approaching what they call the innovation singularity. The term was alien, but the concept was terrifyingly familiar. According to the conspiracy's own analysis, humanity was on the verge of technological breakthroughs that would render their control obsolete. Human creativity, unconstrained by the logical limitations that governed other species, was producing innovations that their models couldn't predict or counter. They mentioned something called quantum consciousness integration, Park noted, reading over her shoulder, and nonlinear dimensional engineering. "These are theoretical concepts we haven't even invented yet. But they know we will," Tanaka said grimly. "Their predictive models show a 94% probability that humans will develop these technologies within the next 50 years. Technologies that would make us immune to their manipulation." The final piece of the puzzle came from an encrypted communication between the three conspiracy leaders. Dated just hours before Chun's murder, Vasquez translated the alien script with growing horror. "The Terran ambassador has accessed, restricted, financial records. Probability of exposure now exceeds acceptable parameters. Recommend immediate implementation of protocol. 7. Elimination of primary threat followed by false flag justification for species containment." "Protocol 7, Santos repeated. That's what they're calling Operation Clean Slate. Vasquez nodded, pulling up the operational details. A coordinated attack on the civilian station New Geneva, using weapons that will be traced back to human terrorists. The casualties will justify a protective quarantine of the Sol system, essentially trapping us in our own star system until they can engineer our downfall. The attack was scheduled to begin in 18 hours. As the team absorbed this information, alarms began blaring throughout Nexus Prime. The station's security grid had detected their unauthorized network access, and Corvani security teams were already converging on their section. "We need to move," Santos ordered, but Tanaka was still frantically working at her improvised communication array. "Almost got it," she muttered, her fingers dancing over alien interfaces with desperate precision. "I can piggyback a signal through their own quantum relay network cues their infrastructure against them." The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridors, accompanied by the distinctive chittering of Vexter security drones. They had minutes at most before their hiding place was discovered. "There," Tanaka announced triumphantly, "I've established a link to the Defiance. We can transmit everything we've found." But as she began uploading their evidence, proximity sensors detected something that made Park's blood run cold. "Energy signatures consistent with Corvani neural disruptors," he reported. "They're not trying to capture us. They're planning to eliminate us and blame it on equipment failure." Santos made a command decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "Alina, Yuki, get to the Defiance and make sure this information reaches Earth. James and I will buy you time." "Maria," Vasquez began, but Santos cut her off. "That's an order, Doctor. The galaxy needs to know what we've discovered, even if we don't survive to see justice done." As Vasquez and Tanaka disappeared into the station's maintenance tunnels, Santos and Park prepared to make their last stand. They were two humans with improvised weapons against an alien security force equipped with technology that could stop their hearts with a thought. But they had one advantage: their enemies couldn't quantify or counter. They were fighting for something greater than themselves, for the memory of Ambassador Chen, for the future of their species, for the principle that justice mattered more than survival. The conspiracy had spent centuries studying human behavior, cataloging their responses, predicting their actions. But they had missed the most important truth about humanity when pushed to the edge. Humans didn't become more predictable, they became absolutely unpredictable. As the first Corvani security officers rounded the corner, weapons charging with lethal energy, Santos smiled grimly. The aliens were about to learn why underestimating human desperation was always a fatal mistake. Behind them, the transmission continued, carrying the truth across the galaxy at the speed of light. Whatever happened in the next few minutes, the conspiracy's 800-year reign of terror was about to end. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity had nothing left to lose. Admiral Jackson Hayes received Captain Santos's encrypted transmission at 0300 Earth Standard Time, but sleep had abandoned him hours earlier. At 62, the Admiral had spent 4 decades in Earth's Navy, rising through the ranks during humanity's most tumultuous period of expansion into space. He had negotiated with asteroid miners, quelled colonial rebellions, and overseen humanity's first tentative steps into galactic politics. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for the systematic murder of Earth's voice in the galaxy. "Get me a secure channel to Special Operations," Hayes ordered his aide, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, and Wake-Up Director Chun Chinese. To know her daughter is dead before this becomes a media circus, the response from Earth's leadership was swift and unequivocal. Within 12 hours of Santos's report, Hayes had authorization for Operation Silent Thunder, a covert investigation that would either uncover the truth or irrevocably damage Earth's relationship with the Galactic Council. The risk was enormous, but as President Martinez had grimly noted during the emergency cabinet meeting, "If we let them murder our ambassadors without consequence, we've already lost everything that matters." Hayes assembled his team with surgical precision. Dr. James Park, a forensic pathologist whose expertise in xenobiology had made him invaluable during humanity's early contact with alien species. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka, a cyber warfare specialist whose unconventional thinking had earned her both commendations and reprimands in equal measure. Dr. Alina Vasquez, a xenanthropologist whose insights into alien psychology had helped prevent 3 diplomatic incidents in the past 2 years. The challenge was getting them onto Nexus Prime without alerting the Galactic Council's extensive surveillance network. Fortunately, humanity's reputation for primitive technology worked in their favor. While alien security systems monitored for sophisticated infiltration techniques, they paid little attention to the crude cargo haulers and maintenance vessels that kept the massive station functioning. Dr. Park arrived first. Concealed among a shipment of medical supplies destined for the station's human civilian population. His equipment, disguised as standard medical scanners, had been modified by Earth's best engineers to analyze alien forensic evidence using techniques the galaxy's advanced civilizations had long since abandoned as inefficient. They cremated the body 6 hours ago. Santos informed him during their clandestine meeting in a maintenance corridor deep within the station's infrastructure. But I managed to preserve tissue samples before they could destroy everything. Park's analysis began immediately, using methods that would have made his alien counterparts scoff with disdain. Where they relied on energy scans and quantum analysis, Park employed the painstaking chemical analysis that had been the foundation of human forensic science for centuries. What he discovered vindicated every primitive technique in his arsenal. Corvani neural poison, he announced, his voice tight with controlled anger. Trace amounts, but unmistakable. This substance doesn't occur naturally, has to be synthesized in specialized laboratories. The Corvani were one of the Council's founding species, renowned for their biochemical expertise and their role in developing many of the galaxy's medical technologies. The idea that Corvani poison had killed Ambassador Chen wasn't just evidence of murder, it pointed directly at the highest levels of galactic power. Lieutenant Tanaka infiltrated the station's data networks using an approach that alien security architects had never anticipated. While they protected against sophisticated quantum intrusions and AI-driven attacks, they had little defense against old-fashioned social engineering combined with hardware modifications that bordered on the primitive by galactic standards. Their security is incredible if you attack it head-on, Tanaka explained to her teammates during a late-night briefing in an abandoned storage bay. But it assumes logical, predictable attack patterns. They can't comprehend someone who would physically splice into fiber optic cables and manually bypass security nodes. Her unconventional methods yielded extraordinary results. Financial records that had been permanently deleted were recovered from backup systems that aliens assumed no one would bother to check. Security footage that had been declared corrupted beyond recovery was painstakingly reconstructed using data recovery techniques that predated galactic civilization by millennia. The picture that emerged was damning beyond Hayes' worst fears. Ambassador Chen hadn't just stumbled onto a simple corruption scheme. She had uncovered a conspiracy that reached back centuries and involved 3 of the Council's most powerful species. Dr. Vasquez's analysis of the recovered communications provided the final piece of the puzzle. Her expertise in alien psychology, developed through years of studying behavioral patterns across dozens of species, revealed a truth that chilled the investigation team to their cores. They're not just selling weapons to rebels, Vasquez explained, her usually calm demeanor cracking with the weight of her discovery. They're creating the rebels in the first place. Every spontaneous uprising in the past century, every independence movement that destabilized a star system, every terrorist attack that justified increased military spending, it's all been orchestrated. The conspiracy's method was elegantly simple and utterly ruthless. The Corvani provided the biochemical weapons and poisons. The ethereal Dominion used their telepathic abilities to identify and manipulate potential dissidents. The machine race nexus provided the logistics and communication networks to coordinate operations across galactic distances. They identified species with high adaptability and creativity, Vasquez continued. Then engineer conflicts to keep them distracted and weakened. It's selective pressure on a galactic scale. The implications were staggering. Humanity, with its notorious unpredictability and creative problem-solving abilities, represented exactly the kind of threat that the conspiracy had spent centuries eliminating. Chen's murder wasn't just about silencing one inconvenient investigator, it was the opening move in a campaign to ensure that Earth never developed into a serious challenge to the established order. As the team gathered their evidence, they realized they were racing against time in more ways than one. Tanaka's network infiltration had revealed communications indicating that the conspiracy was planning something called Operation Clean Slate. A false flag attack that would be blamed on human terrorists and justify Earth's quarantine or elimination. "We have maybe 72 hours before they move," Tanaka reported grimly, "and our communication channels to Earth are being systematically compromised." The situation appeared hopeless. 3 humans and 1 sympathetic ship captain against a conspiracy that had controlled galactic politics for centuries. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and cut off from support. But Admiral Chen had taught her daughter one lesson that would prove crucial in the days ahead. And Santos remembered it as she looked at her assembled team. When you're cornered and outmatched, that's when you remember what makes you human. We don't fight because we can win. We fight because it's right. The investigation was complete. Now came the hard part: surviving long enough to expose the truth to a galaxy that might not want to hear it. As they prepared to transmit their findings to Earth through a jury-rigged communication array that Tanaka had cobbled together from salvaged alien technology, Santos reflected on the bitter irony of their situation. The conspiracy had dismissed human technology as primitive, human tactics as chaotic, human emotions as weakness. They were about to learn why those assumptions were fatal errors in judgment. The galaxy was about to meet humanity at its most dangerous when it had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The morning cycle on Nexus Prime began like any other in the station's diplomatic quarter. Artificial sunlight filtered through the massive transparent steel dome, casting warm shadows across the carefully maintained gardens that housed flora from dozens of worlds. Ambassador Sarah Chen had always found the morning meditation hour peaceful, a time when the cacophony of alien languages faded to a distant hum, and she could center herself for another day of navigating the labyrinthine politics of the Galactic Council. She never made it to her usual bench beside the Terran oak saplings. Chief of Security Mordok, a towering hegemony warrior whose species had evolved from pack hunters, discovered the body at 0847 station time. His guttural roar of alarm echoed through the residential corridors, a sound that spoke of primal recognition of death regardless of species. Within minutes, the diplomatic quarter swarmed with security personnel, their various forms of communication, creating a babel of clicks, whistles, subsonic rumbles, and electromagnetic pulses. Ambassador Chen lay in her private quarters, her slight frame appearing even smaller against the oversized furniture designed to accommodate the galaxy's larger species. The human diplomatic corps had learned to adapt to such inconveniences over the past 5 years since first contact, but Chen had never complained. She had embraced every challenge of being humanity's voice in a cosmos that still viewed Earth as an infant civilization. Now she would never speak again. Detective Zicht of the Vexstar Collective arrived within the hour, his crystalline carapace gleaming under the room's sterile lighting. The insectoid investigator moved with mechanical precision, his compound eyes recording every detail while his 4 arms manipulated scanning devices with practiced efficiency. Behind him followed a retinue of junior investigators, each representing different species, but all sharing the same air of clinical detachment. Preliminary scans indicate technological malfunction, Zicht announced, his words emerging from a translation device that rendered his natural chittering into standard galactic. Primitive human neural interface appears to have overloaded, causing catastrophic brain damage. Captain Maria Santos of the Earth vessel Defiance, docked at Nexus Prime for routine supply runs, arrived as the Vexstar were cataloging the scene. A career military officer with 23 years of service, Santos had seen enough death to recognize murder when she encountered it. Her dark eyes swept across the room, noting details that the alien investigators seemed determined to ignore. "That's not technological failure," Santos stated flatly, gesturing toward Chun's body. "Look at the surgical precision of the translator removal. Look at those burn marks. They're too controlled to systematic." Detective Zicht's mandibles clicked in what might have been irritation. "Captain Santos, with respect, human investigative techniques are ... rudimentary. Your species lacks the advanced scanning capabilities necessary for proper forensic analysis. What appears deliberate to your primitive senses is merely the result of energy discharge patterns consistent with malfunctioning biotech." Santos, bit back her immediate response. 5 years of diplomatic relations had taught humanity that direct confrontation with Galactic Council members rarely yielded positive results. Instead, she observed, cataloging every detail with the thoroughness that had made her one of Earth's most decorated intelligence officers before her transfer to diplomatic security, carefully extracted while Chen was still alive. The burn marks weren't random energy discharges but followed specific neural pathways, suggesting intimate knowledge of human brain anatomy. Most telling was Chun's right hand, clenched in a fist with what appeared to be fragments of crystalline material under her fingernails, evidence of a struggle that the alien scans had somehow missed. "The investigation is concluded, Zik," announced after barely 2 hours of examination, death by technological incompatibility. "We recommend that human ambassadors undergo more extensive cybernetic screening before future diplomatic postings." 2 hours. Santos couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "For a galactic ambassador's death, human lifespans are brief, Captain. Extended investigation of inevitable mortality serves no logical purpose." The detective's compound eyes fixed on her with alien coldness. "The Galactic Council extends its regrets to Earth for this unfortunate accident." As the investigation team began to disperse, Santos noticed something they had missed entirely, or perhaps chosen to ignore. Chun's personal computer terminal. It was still active, its screen displaying what appeared to be an encrypted file transfer that had completed just 17 minutes before the estimated time of death. The timestamp showed Chen had managed to send something to an Earth Navy frequency moments before her murder. The funeral proceedings moved with unseemly haste. Within 6 hours of the body's discovery, Council authorities were preparing to dispose of Chun's remains according to standard protocols for biological contamination prevention. When Santos requested time for human burial rites, organic matter, it was then that Santos realized they weren't just covering up a murder, they were actively erasing evidence of it. That evening, alone in her cabin, aboard the Defiance, Santos accessed her ship's quantum communication array and retrieved the encrypted files Chen had transmitted in her final moments. The ambassador's last act hadn't been to call for help, it had been to ensure that her work survived her death. The files painted a picture that made Santos's blood run cold. Chen had been investigating financial irregularities in the Council's military procurement division, tracking massive payments to shell companies that existed only in the digital shadows of galactic commerce. More damning still were the communication intercepts, conversations between high-ranking Council members discussing the human problem and the need for corrective measures. The final file was a personal message. Chen's face pale but determined as she spoke directly to the camera. "If you're receiving this, then my worst fears have been confirmed. They know I'm close to exposing them, and they can't risk letting me present my findings to Earth. Maria, I'm counting on you to finish what I started. Don't let them bury the truth with my body." Santos stared at the now dark screen, Chun's final words echoing in her mind. Around her, the Defiance hummed with the quiet efficiency of human engineering systems that the aliens considered crude and inefficient, but which had carried humanity to the stars through sheer stubborn determination. The Galactic Council had made a critical error in their assessment of human nature. They had assumed that, like most species, humans would accept the death of one individual as an acceptable loss to maintain galactic stability. They had calculated that Earth's desire for continued diplomatic relations would outweigh any quest for justice. They had forgotten that humans had a concept that seemed to be unique in the galaxy, that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the odds or the cost. As Santos began composing her report to Earth Command, she reflected on something Chen had once said during one of their many conversations about the challenges of interspecies diplomacy. "They think our emotions make us weak. To Maria, they're going to learn that our emotions make us unstoppable." The investigation was far from over.